Welcome. I'm Terry Cohan-Link, principal of LINKCO. Good morning to those of you joining us from the Western US and Canada, and good afternoon, good evening for the rest of our audience. Thank you for joining the webinar, LA County Sustainability Plan 2023 Priorities and Initiatives. I will introduce our speaker in a few moments. We are thrilled to welcome many returning participants to our series today. However, first-timers may be wondering why LINKCO, an executive search firm, moderates webinars such as this. It's our way of giving back and sharing relevant information we learn interacting with business leaders on a day-to-day basis. The webinar and our article series have been inspired by the insights shared by business leaders about the dynamically shifting business climate. It's all started with a white paper entitled Resilient Realism, and it's on our website. In the wake of COVID-19, here is what we are noting. Business leaders are grappling with the risks and economics related to their personnel, physical and intellectual assets, products, and services. The disruptors, challenges, opportunities, and insights that LINKCO has focused on in our webinars to date include remote hybrid workforces and physical workspace demands and expectations, how to manage business risk and work product, remote cybersecurity practices to protect assets, employees, and clients, dynamically changing logistics and transportation, environmental impacts of the pandemic, what is ESG, and how do we pragmatically plan, measure, and audit our success, how real is green investing, and how to evaluate and plan for climate risk, how to avoid greenwashing pitfalls. Today's webinar focuses on sustainability, ESG, environmental, social, and governance plans as envisioned by Los Angeles County, one of the largest counties in the United States. The subtext underlining our conversation is what your business and you as a business leader can learn from the evolution of LA County Sustainability Plan, and where might adroit businesses be able to engage in public-private partnerships. All future webinars are announced on the LINKCO website via LinkedIn, and via LinkedIn, and we are always open to topic and speaker suggestions from our network. Housekeeping. Today we'll begin with our speaker setting the stage for a better understanding of Los Angeles County's sustainability plan and new initiatives. If you have a clarifying question during the overview, please ask it in the questions box and we'll try to address it. After this introduction, we will open up for general questions. Some of you have shared your questions beforehand, and those are already in our queue. Please take advantage of the question box for additional questions during the webinar. Dr. Rita Kampalath, PE, is the Acting Chief Sustainability Officer, County of Los Angeles Chief Sustainability Office, and she's back by popular demand. You can find her first webinar on our website. Rita joined the County of Los Angeles Chief Sustainability Office in June 2017 as a Sustainability Program Director. She supports development and implementation of the county's first sustainability plan, in addition to providing policy support for other county sustainability-related initiatives. In May 2022, she was appointed Acting Chief Sustainability Officer. Prior to joining the county, Rita was the Science and Policy Director of the nonprofit Heal the Bay, where she oversaw advocacy and research projects related to water quality and water resources, and guided the development of Heal the Bay's positions on a wide range of policy issues. And before joining Heal the Bay, she worked at Syntec Consultants on a range of water quality projects, primarily focused on stormwater. Rita received a BS in chemical engineering from Columbia University and an MS in chemical engineering and a PhD in civil environmental engineering from UCLA. In a second, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Rita and begin our presentation. So welcome, Rita. Let me just give you session control. And while I'm doing that, you'll just choose the PowerPoint at the bottom and you can begin.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Terry. And that was a lot of background. I appreciate that. No, thank you for the great introduction. And of course, good to be back here with all of you. And thank you for joining. So as Terry mentioned, I'm going to start with kind of a background on the office, kind of a refresher on the plan as well. I'm not sure how many people joined for the first time I did this webinar, but it's probably been a little while since we talked about it. So I'll just do a little quick overview as a refresher of what the plan is about, and then kind of talk about some of our priorities over the next year. So I will start with that. Okay, let's see. Let's make sure I can advance the slide. All right. Not that it's that exciting of a slide, but let me start there. So, yeah, so, Terry again shared a lot of background about me. So I'll mainly focus about the office. So our Chief Sustainability Office, and I'll switch here. This is our mission statement. You don't have to read the whole thing, but basically, the Chief Sustainability Office is a pretty small office. We've been at the county since about 2016 is when we were first established, with our first Chief Sustainability Officer, Gary Giroux. As Terry mentioned, I joined the office in 2017. I think I was technically the first person to join the team for Gary. And, our primary focus was to create a sustainability plan, which is the first for the county. Really the idea behind having a Chief Sustainability Office is that the county does a lot of things related to sustainability, but we really didn't have like sort of a comprehensive vision of what we were driving towards and like what our goals were. What does it mean to be sustainable? The board of supervisors really wanted to make sure that that was a cohesive goal that we were working towards with departments. Things were coordinated, definitely not at odds with each other, but also we're able to like really coordinate and help each other achieve these goals. So again, in addition to creating the sustainability plan, we also provide policy support for the board of supervisors. Now that the plan is adopted, which it was adopted in fall 2019, we focus a lot on implementation of the plan. So again, we are just 6 folks. We work very closely in coordination with the departments as well, where again, we tend to set policy and help provide like strategic guidance and vision, and then the county departments are really our partners in implementation. So I will start again with a quick overview of the plan. Again, that was kind of our first charge when we were created, was to create a sustainability plan, because as I mentioned before, the county did not have one previously, like sort of this strategic plan. So again, in a few words, the plan is, of course, aspirational. We wanted it to be ambitious. That was the directive we got from the board as well. Comprehensive, so in the sense of, we really don't want to just look at environmental sustainability, but really how that balances, true sustainability, which balances social equity and economy and workforce as well, and look at how all of those 3 things interplay to make a sustainable LA County. Also wanted it to be long-term, of course, so the plan sets goals out as far as 2045. Regional is another important thing. So this kind of represented a shift, I think, in the thinking of the Board of Supervisors from not just looking at unincorporated areas, which is really where we have land use control, but really thinking about how we can play a role setting a regional vision for sustainability across the whole county, and supporting the 88 cities as well. And then finally, actionable. It's always a balance between the aspirational part and the actionable. We want it to be a plan that is setting forth goals that again we can work to achieve and our challenges like beyond where we're at right now. But at the same time, we don't want it to be so ambitious that it feels like we can't really make any progress towards it. So all of that said, and I'll talk a little bit about the breadth of the actions. It is like a strategic plan. So if you look at it, it does set a vision and strategy and actions towards achieving things, but it's not really a detailed implementation guide, which is, why a lot of our work now is really looking more into those details. And I'll talk a little bit more about the implementation in a bit. But, it has, we have a practice of setting priorities year to year. So taking small bits of it and then putting them into action over time. There are 159 actions in the plan, so it's quite large. And then the last thing I just wanted to say again, as we talked about, it's regional. This is a question we get frequently is, how do you set a regional plan when the county doesn't control everything that is related to sustainability? And, we try to be very clear about that in the plan. There are things that we have direct control over like county operations and facilities, unincorporated areas. The county by itself, of course, is quite large. We have, I think, around 100,000 employees. So we're almost like a small city ourselves. And we have, land use control over the unincorporated areas, which by itself is 1 million residents. So nothing small there. But there are also things that are much larger, which we know we need to do in partnership. So with regional agencies, like I said, with 88 cities, with the state, with the private sector, nonprofits. So there's a lot of work that you'll see in the plan that is really going to require partnerships. And that's something that we really try to embrace as an office. All right, so just digging a little bit more into the structure of the plan. One of the things we really wanted to emphasize is just how cross-sectoral sustainability is. So, you won't really see like a water goal or an energy goal. It's really about setting forth a vision for what we wanted to see, what we thought meant, sustainable LA County is. So there are these high-level goals, then some more specific strategies under each goal statement, and then actions to achieve that strategy. So this is an example here. One of the goals is thriving ecosystems and habitats. A strategy there is to preserve and enhance open space. And then a specific action is to develop a parks and open space master plan that sets out goals for acquiring, preserving, and restoring open space areas. So again, I won't read all of these, but just to give you a sense of the breadth and the scope of the plan, these are the high-level goals. There's 2 slides here, so there are 12 of them in total. But again, we really tried to formulate vision statements for what a sustainable LA would look like and really avoid those silos. So it's things like equitable and sustainable land use, buildings and infrastructure that support human health, accessible parks, a fossil fuel-free LA County. I'll be talking about that a little bit later. Sustainable production and consumption of resources, and sustainable just food system. That's another one that I'll talk about a little bit more. We've been focused on some actions related to that. And then the last 2 goals are really more process-oriented and about governance. This is another thing that is really important to us, and we really see as key to having a sustainable implementation of this is inclusive, transparent, and accountable governance, and then partnerships, as I mentioned. So creative, equitable, coordinated funding and partnerships. That's the ideal that we're working towards. All right. In addition to these like high levels goals and strategies and actions, we also thought that it was really important, again, thinking about implementation, how you really make this actionable and build accountability, and not just have a plan that sits on a shelf. We did try to set forth these numeric indicators. I will say that our indicators are really more regional in scope. So one of the things that we've a lesson learned, I think, that we will probably revisit in the next iteration of the plan is how do we more closely tie these targets and numeric indicators to the actual actions in the plan so that we can track them a little bit better. These were really more of, again, like I said, like regional targets. Another issue which has been kind of interesting to tangle with is as we were looking at these indicators and trying to measure progress and where we are as a region, there were definitely a lot of data sets that we would have loved to have that we didn't. I think that remains an open question about how we collect that data and, are better able to measure progress as well. So again, this is like a kind of an example target. We set baseline. We put forth baseline data that we could gather, and then we set these longer term goals, 2025, which is right around the corner somehow, 2035, and then out to 2045. Okay. And then just again, another, just digging in a little bit more. This is an example of an action. Like I said before, it was really important for us as we were thinking about implementation being actionable to really build accountability and transparency into these actions. Part of that was assigning responsibility, right? And like setting at least some kind of goal for how long it would take. So with every action, you'll see them categorized with some of these similar indicators. So, one is the horizon. How quickly do we think we can get this done? In this case, this is considered a short-term action, which is like roughly in the next 5 years or so. There's a sphere of influence, like I was talking about in the beginning. Is this something that we feel like we can directly do ourselves as the county, or do we feel like it's going to require partnerships? We also assign a lead county entity. And again, and when I talk about some of the implementation steps we took, again, to just build in that structure of accountability, one of the things that we did was priorities and having departments report back on the actions that they are the leads of. So that was really important to kind of establish who is kind of in charge, obviously, not just the county as a whole, but specific departments. We also named partners and then topic tags, kind of just a way to sort of organize the plan. Because even though everything is like sort of cross-sector, as we said, we did also want to kind of tag things so they'd be easy to find. We understand there's some people who are specifically interested in water actions or economy and workforce actions, et cetera. So with this one in particular, again, this is one that I'll be talking about a little bit more later. This was about developing a just transition plan that's to support workers in the transition away from fossil fuels. So as we know, in order to meet our climate goals, we need to move away from fossil fuel extraction and consumption activities. And part of the balance of sustainability was really that we wanted to ensure that as we're doing those kinds of things to phase out certain industries, we want to make sure that those workers have support and have a place to go, and that we're really thinking, proactively about that, and not just kind of, phasing something out without there being anywhere to go. All right. Okay. So I also just wanted to note that a really key piece of the Our County plan is that we want to be very intentional about building equity into the plan, not just as a separate chapter, but really kind of throughout the entire plan. And part of the reason for that is because, we know that there are some pretty serious social equities in LA County. So this reflects a tool, data from a tool called CalEnviroScreen, which some of you may be familiar with. And, again, like LA County is home to half of all census tracts in the state of California that are, categorized as being the most disadvantaged per CalEnviroScreen. And so we know that a lot of those issues with environmental justice and environmental burden are kind of at the root of our sustainability problems. So we need to kind of address that if we really want a sustainable future. So, that of course begs the question, what do we mean by equity? And this is something that is lined out in the plan. So we use a framework that was developed by a group called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. It's a national organization of sustainability offices. And they kind of set forth this definition of equity kind of based on, which is really kind of through a sustainability lens, right? So what does it mean to have like an equity-based sustainability plan? And it uses really these 4 definitions. Again, they didn't invent this. This is pretty common in a lot of definitions of equity, but they really lined it out and kind of wanted to make it, see how it like applied specifically in sustainability issues. So the first is procedural equity. That is, from the very beginning, we want to make sure that there's authentic engagement in processes for underrepresented groups, that people really feel like they can take part in creating plans and policies. Second, I think, is what a lot of people think about when they think about equity, which is distributional. So where are the resources going? Also the burdens, right? So we want to make sure that we are not also putting more burdens on one community than another, and really trying to analyze that. The next one is structural equity. So it's just recognizing historic and cultural and institutional structures that have led to current inequities. And then finally, there's transgenerational equity, which I see as like so key to a lot of our discussions around climate change. So, making sure that the decisions that we're making today are not going to create unfair burdens on future generations. And then, of course, overlying this is a recognition of structural racism and how that has led to inequities for communities of color. All right. So with that, I'm going to shift to just talking about implementation. As I said, we were excited to get this plan put together. It was about a 1.5-year process, I think, and then we were able to take it to the board, where it was unanimously adopted in fall of 2019. And since then, we've been working on implementation. Of course, and I'll allude to this later as I'm talking about some of our priorities, the pandemic happens, and that certainly affected how we were able to implement the plan. But, as I think hopefully I'll talk about, we've still been able to get a lot of work done and, have like a really great start on a lot of these priorities. So as much time as we put into creating the plan, I think that we also wanted to be really strategic when it came to implementation. Like I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a plan that sits on a shelf, but is really being implemented. And, people are taking it seriously and working towards the actions that we wanted to put forward in partnership with communities. So these were a few things that happened when the board actually adopted it. They also had the wisdom, we worked with them to kind of put in place these structures of accountability and reporting, just to kind of, again, ensure that work continued forward. So, oh yeah, Terry, was there a question?
Yeah, there was a question. Are there now plans to grow your team to achieve these goals? And has the Olympics changed the plan or discussion at all?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of growing the team, we have grown a bit since we were first formed. We're still, again, small. We've grown from, I think, 4 policy staff to 6. We do also have like a new position that was added, which I will talk about a little bit more, which is a climate resilience officer. And that was in response to a board direction to actually create a climate resilience initiative within the office. And so there is one staff position related to that, but I'm hoping that we will actually be able to build that out to like more of a team. But I think that is something that I'm thinking about, is like, as we're shifting from a group that's primarily developing a plan to actually working in coordination with departments to implement the plan, what does that mean for our structure and how we need to kind of operate? So that's very insightful question. As far as the Olympics, we were involved a bit as the proposals were going forward, and I imagine that we will be going forward as like it starts to pick up steam in terms of planning for it. I don't think that it's really going to change the implementation actions. Although, you know, I will say that we committed to a 5-year update, roughly, of the plan. And so we're gearing up to like start that process of updating it. So I wouldn't be surprised if some topics around the Olympics come up. But, you know, generally, I would see our actions kind of staying similar. You know, of course, a lot of the Olympics activity is going to be in the city of LA. Not all of it. Some of it's going to be throughout the region. But, you know, I don't see it shifting our priorities necessarily. But I wouldn't be surprised, again, if it comes up in the update about how we may specifically want to design implementation or sustainability actions around that. Was there anything else, or?
Sure, but I want first for you to.
Okay, yeah. I think I just have probably a couple more slides before I'll pause for questions and we can dig into some of this stuff. So yeah, just again, I think these things were, again, like very important and have proven to be even more important as we're trying to actually take action on some of the sustainability work. So the first one, again, is that the board actually has a set of what they call board-directed priorities. This is like a very inside baseball kind of thing. Although, I mean, you know, they're publicly facing. The board is pretty clear about it. But in terms of how this impacts things, you know, there are, you know, it prioritizes things in terms of budget and all sorts of other sort of you know, more like administrative functions in the county that can be centered around these board-directed priorities. So declaring sustainability as a board-directed priority not only like sort of elevated it from like a communication standpoint, but it has also created like sort of these other levers that we can use to kind of move things forward. And then another thing which was really key, I think, is that they directed that performance evaluations of our department heads have to include reporting back on how they're implementing the plan. So that's like a lever that I think other jurisdictions have used, and I think is really important, is actually, again, like tying the implementation of the plan to those performance evaluations. It's something that people need to actually report on and be held accountable to. The next thing, as I said, is that we developed an ongoing process about implementation, right? So it's not just sort of open-ended, yeah, we're going to sort of work on things. We've actually been directed to, on an annual basis, develop a set of priorities. And these priorities are supposed to inform the county's budget process and, you know, as well as the legislative process as well. So that's been really important. Then annually also, not just set priorities, but also report on plan progress. So again, these are just systems of like reporting, transparency, and accountability, just kind of keeping the plan at the top of people's minds within the county and making sure that we're taking steps towards it. All right, so I think with that, the last thing I was going to just name are some key priorities, and I won't dig too much into these right now. I think I'm going to pause and see if there are any specific questions. But you know, I do have a few more slides that I can use to talk through some of these if we have questions. But these were just a few things that I wanted to name that are really on the horizon for 2023 that our office is really going to be focused on. One is an urban forest management plan. That is a plan that we received funding for from the state, CAL FIRE, and we'll be working on that through 2023 or 2024, sorry. It's the first county urban forest management plan. And so it's really going to be, again, like a large stakeholder process, going out to communities, hearing about their priorities, and really looking at how we manage trees, and we sort of strategically try to plan for a larger canopy area. This is another one that's going to be very much driven by equity as well, because we know that there are some communities in the county that have less tree canopy for all sorts of reasons. And we want to do what we can to address that. The next, as I mentioned, is the action that I kind of highlighted, the just transition plan for oil and gas. Next is building decarbonization. This is something that's come up a lot more recently, and it was direction that we got from the board to work in coordination with Public Works to develop an ordinance for new construction to be decarbonized or electrified. last year, we were happy to pass the single-use plastics ordinance at the county. That was a big priority action, and we were able to accomplish that in, I believe, May of last year. And now we've been working with several departments on implementing that. So that's like a lot of education and outreach and kind of working with businesses to, again, support them on understanding the requirements, but also if they're having issues and may need some more time or need help, like identifying products that are compliant, just those kinds of things. And the first like phase of businesses are going to have to achieve compliance with that in May. Again, I can talk about that more, but that's what the ordinance says right now. Although, we're also well aware that there have been supply chain issues. That's something that's come up a lot. That's something we're kind of closely tracking. And then the last two are not actually, this kind of gets into some of the things that we do that are not explicitly in the sustainability plan, but just have risen up as priorities, especially during the pandemic. One is the Food Equity Roundtable. I can talk about that a little bit more if folks have questions. And then Climate Resilience Initiative. Like I said, we're planning on bringing on somebody to lead this as the Climate Resilience Officer. And it's really just kind of an understanding that we need to organize a lot of work around climate resilience. More broadly, infrastructure planning and other kind of supports and services. So I'm going to pause there, Terry, and we can jump into any questions we might have.
Thank you. So this is the time for you to, if you haven't already sent me a question, which I have in my queue, please ask your questions in the question box, and we'll try to address as many of them as we can during the session. Rita, I'm going to start off with one of them that came into the queue previously. And you just actually touched on it somewhat. LA County owns approximately 4,400 properties totaling approximately 65 million square feet. What are LA County's plans regarding ensuring these properties are net zero, and what is your anticipated timeline to accomplish this? And will there be opportunities for public-private partnership collaboration? And if so, how might you envision that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So talking about net zero, that's a pretty broad term, right? I mean, it can be water, energy. We're not exactly framing things around net zero. And again, a lot of the plan is kind of looking at the community at large. We do have like some facility specific goals. So, there are a lot of things that we're doing to like, refurbish buildings. A lot of that work has been happening over the pandemic, again, around water conservation and just being more efficient with energy. Again, not really necessarily framed about achieving net zero specifically, but again, just about like being as efficient as possible and being a leader in that. There's been, again, a ton of work, around just replacing lighting and fixtures and things like that. Our internal services department is also doing a lot of work to really increase EV chargers, for instance. I think that there will, I'm sure a lot of that is being done in partnership with private firms. I'm not sure exactly how far along they are with that, but it is like kind of an ongoing piece of work that's happening. We also recently, again, like I said, not all of our work is specifically directed at county facilities, though a lot of it impacts county facilities ultimately, even if they're larger ordinances. But speaking to the water piece, we did create a water conservation policy for county facilities, which is going to direct shifts, especially in landscaping. So no longer watering what's called non-functional turf, which is sort of a term of art in the water conservation space right now. And then also slowly shifting irrigation systems and things like that. On the waste side, we did have like a zero waste policy that was adopted probably in 2020 or 2021 that impacts county facilities. And, a lot of that is about shifting away from single-use plastics and as much as possible towards reusables with county facilities. That's more ambitious than the ordinance we've just passed, because again, we do want to, where we're setting policies for county facilities specifically, we want to be as ambitious as possible.
Okay, there's two more questions that are here, and I also have some more in the queue. Why are all county parking lots not covered by solar panels? Why aren't all county building rooftops covered with solar panels and or solar thermal technology?
Yeah, I mean, again, that is, I think, so we do have examples of that at some buildings, like in our public works department. I know they have they have a large parking lot in Alhambra that is covered or has like a lot of solar panels. I think that's something that, we probably want to work towards where it makes sense, where it's feasible. But, it's something that happens slowly. Again, we're a large county, and a lot of these things tend to be facility by facility and where funding exists. So like I mentioned, our internal services department is we have some leaders there that are very passionate about energy transition being as efficient as possible. So I think it's something that they would love to do where possible. Right now, I think they are very, they're putting a lot of energy, no pun intended, towards EV chargers and that kind of infrastructure. Because, we know that transportation is one of the highest, causes of GHG emissions. It's really key to our climate action plan to address like transportation emissions. But, it's just a matter of, I think, not being able to, put energy into every single priority at the same time. But I think that's a good idea. And there are instances where that has happened. And I think it'll probably happen more in the future.
Okay. Thanks for the great question, Larry. Michael asks, beyond the single-use plastics ordinance, what other initiatives are envisioned around the broader issue of materials use and waste?
Gosh, what a great question. So this is something that I'm always also thinking about as well. Yeah, I mean, there are, we have like many strategies around this, right? So we were supportive of SB 54 and other state actions that are happening. In a lot of cases, I think we feel that some of these larger issues around materials and waste are things that would be best dealt with at the state level, just because there are these large market factors, right? So I know that's been a frequent point of discussion, is whether LA County by itself can put in place, like for example, extended producer, responsibility type policies, right? And I think generally the sense has been that we would like to have that applied at like a larger market size in order for it to be really effective. So there are cases where we are like supportive and like very engaged, I think, in state legislation and trying to shape that. On a more local level, our public works department is extremely, busy with SB 1383 implementation, which is the organics law that the state put forward. That is going to, I think, create a huge shift in waste management in terms of composting and just organics management facilities. So there are a few things, and then we're always looking at the opportunity for pilots and creative solutions, not just policies and prohibitions, but also like where can we actually partner with companies to figure out creative solutions. I think that's one thing that came up a lot as we were developing the single-use plastics ordinance is how can we maximize reusables. We didn't feel, there are some things that we did around reusables with dine-in restaurants specifically, but we felt like a lot of that wasn't quite ready for like a regulation or an ordinance, but really needed to happen on the partnership level. So, we are talking to have like several conversations with Starbucks, for instance, and also some nonprofit partners who are trying to create pilot projects with individual businesses to see whether there's a model that could work for that. So there are a few things that are happening, but I would definitely say 1383 is something that the county is very, very engaged in right now. And then again, like just watching some of the work that's happening on the state level to really make recycling and composting and waste management more efficient and also more circular as much as we can.
Okay, continuing, thank you. Continuing with some great questions here. Laurel asks, she thanks you, and she asks, was wondering if the county is providing any resources or incentives to cities who develop sustainability or climate action plans. Also wondering if you can discuss how the county will access and use IRA funding.
Yeah. So one of the things, like I said, we do want to take that regional approach and provide assistance to cities as much as possible. Right now, we have a staff who is like our cities coordinator. And right now they've, so this is kind of built out of some of the stakeholder engagement that we did to develop the plan. We held like a couple of like what we called city summits where we invited all of representatives from all the cities to come together to talk about what we were doing, give us input into the plan, and also share what they're doing, what their priorities are. That has now developed into a regular webinar. We're actually hoping to make it more of a workshop. It was prior like more information sharing, and now we would really like to try to do some work to connect people who have similar priorities and start to work across cities. So that is one way that we're trying to support the city. We also do have things like, we have like a resource library on our website where we try to put up like plans, ordinances that can act as like model ordinances for cities as well. Like, so things like the plastics ordinance, there was a cool roofs ordinance. There's a clean fleet board policy that we put forward, and we try to make those as accessible as possible in case other cities would like to adopt them. So IRA funding. So the county obviously has been trying, is really interested in making sure that we are maximizing our access to federal funds that are available for to push forward some of these priorities. That's not just IRA, but BIL kind of started with the BIL process as well, funding. We have sort of organized internally. There's like sort of internal working groups that are trying to share projects. And then our public works department also has a structure called Infrastructure LA, where they're convening some very large like regional infrastructure entities. And kind of the goal of that is to, again, do some coordination on a regional basis about what our priorities are, and kind of identify projects that we can put forward for some of these large funding pots. One of the things that we frequently hear as like sort of critique, feedback about the LA region is that because we are so large, it's sometimes hard to understand what the priorities are, or there's just a lot of different voices talking about priorities. And that makes sense. I mean, we're enormous, right? I don't think there's ever going to be a point, and we wouldn't want to try to like supersede other people's priorities. But, we are hoping that if we can at least put forward a few sort of signature large regional projects and speak as like one voice across a few large agencies, that will make us more, more attractive for funding.
Okay, some more questions, Rita. Mark asks, it does not sound like LA County is considering incorporating carbon offsets to help offset the cost of these initiatives.
Yes, that is not something that we're weighing right now. So our regional planning department is, they've been in the process of creating a climate action plan to achieve carbon goals more broadly. And, if you look at that, they're kind of reworking it right now. But, you can see sort of the strategies that the county is looking at employing to kind of get to those goals. But yes, in terms of to fund the initiatives, that's not something we're looking at right now.
Okay. And Laurel asks another question. How will compliance with the single-use plastics ordinance be monitored and enforced?
So, one of the things that is sort of an advantage for us as the county with putting forward an ordinance like this is that we have the public health department, which serves as restaurant inspectors. or inspectors of any food serving business. So they are able to report back if they see violations. That's something they were partners on developing the ordinance because of that role that they play. The county has been very clear from the beginning that we don't want to take a punitive approach to enforcing this ordinance, but our goal isn't to like put forward a lot of fines. It's to get people in compliance. So their directive that they've gotten is that if we're going to take a slow approach. We're taking a full year between like adoption to the first point of compliance with businesses. Right now, what they're working on is creating a website, creating education and outreach materials with those inspectors are going to be handing out and are already handing out, I think, to businesses as they kind of go through their routine visits, so that people are aware of what's coming forward. And then just a lot of stakeholder meetings or meetings with business owners who approach public works with questions about like how they should comply. So yeah, ultimately, first it's kind of a partnership in terms of monitoring and enforcement. Public health inspectors are sort of the on the ground eyes, like in businesses about what's happening. And then what is probably going to happen is they're going to, if they do see something, they will refer that business to public works, who are like our waste experts and the ordinance experts, and they can then do that outreach to see what's going on. But again, like the approach is first education. So, are they aware of the ordinance? Do they know what products are compliant? Do they need assistance in identifying or, getting any of those products? And I think we would hopefully not get to this point, but there would be like sort of an iterative process where if we just have people who would just absolutely refuse to work towards compliance, then there is a system of fines.
Okay. Thank you. Paul is jumping into the public-private partnership opportunity and asks, we have clean energy and water conservation program that provides zero carbon energy and saves millions of gallons of water using floating solar on reservoirs. Would LA Sustainability support our program to show a collaborative effort?
We frequently get requests from partners for support letters and other things like that, like how we can assist them. We are always happy to do what we can. Again, like sometimes that's letters of support. Sometimes that's connecting people with resources within the county or county departments if there's like a permitting issue or something like that that we can help on. So we're happy to support. I think we just need to explore like what it is exactly that our office can help with, but we're happy to have that conversation.
Okay. And Larry's asking, why isn't there a sense of urgency in the implementation of your plans and actual on-the-ground actions to address climate change?
Well, I am sorry if I didn't communicate a sense of urgency. I think there is a sense of urgency. So we didn't actually talk. I think we got to the point in my presentation where we were talking about priorities, but not some of the things we've actually achieved and are working on.
And please let's address some of those now, Rita, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We can talk about some of that. Again, there are a lot of actions to address climate change, and those are things that we've been working on pretty actively. There was a lot of, there was a lot of capacity burden in terms of the pandemic. As I mentioned, the county is the public health department for the entire region. And there was a lot of energy that was turned towards that, energy and resources. That doesn't mean that we've ignored some of the implementation around climate change. So, and the sustainability plan. So again, just as a remander, the plan was adopted at the end of 2019. Since then, as I mentioned, we have the UFMP. There were early actions around planting in some of our most disadvantaged communities, which we've done. We did do the single-use plastics ordinance, which is actually I think the most ambitious ordinance, or one of the most ambitious ordinance, certainly for a jurisdiction anywhere near our size in the country. And then a really huge action that the board took is phasing out oil drilling in the county. So that's not something that we've talked about quite yet, but that is one of the things that's informed the just transition work and kind of pushed it to a priority, is the fact that that phase out happened. And that's something that the board directed, I think, in 2021, and the ordinance was just developed and adopted earlier this month, I believe. So sorry, it's February. So last month in January. And so what that means is there will be no new oil drilling in the county. And we're now currently going through an amortization study to see how quickly existing oil wells, oil and gas drilling can be shut down. So those are like some of the bigger actions that we've taken. And again, like I said, we're creating a climate action plan, which is setting forward, an actual roadmap, numeric, and which we must be held to, legally enforceable plan towards reducing emissions in the county. So those are just a few things.
So Rita, in the queue that that I have in front of me in terms of questions, I wanted you to please expand a little bit, if you would, on opportunities for sites and workers as they transition. What the county thinking is until now on since you've just spoken about the new oil drilling ordinance.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, the key way that we've been addressing that is the development of a just transition strategy. I'm going to flip. I actually have like some slides about that. I will flip forward to that in just a minute, but just as like some context, again, that ordinance was passed, was in the works over the past year, and then was adopted by the board in January. The city of LA also adopted a similar ordinance at the end of last year. And when they gave the direction to create that ordinance, they also gave us the direction to pull together this task force to look at what that transition looks like. So away from oil and gas. And so over the past year and a half or so, we convened a very diverse group of stakeholders. There are environmental justice groups, environmental groups, industry stakeholders, labor union representatives, and academia and local jurisdictions. And they created the Just Transition Strategy. And again, let me see if I can flip through. Ooh. Sorry, lots of slides here. Okay, here is my slide on the Just Transition Strategy. So this was done in partnership, again, with the city. And that strategy was released in December of 2023. So 2023, sorry, 2022. There's a typo there. So it is on our website if anybody would like to check that out. So the plan includes 19 specific actions. It includes retraining programs for displaced workers, directives to access federal funding, and also looking at not only how we support workers, but site remediation, and starting that discussion with communities of what those remediated sites turn into. So is it open space? Is it housing? Is it business developments? Those kinds of things. Like, what are the priorities, and what are we able to do to sort of, direct that as well? So as part of that, one of the things that we did was brought on a consultant to really look more in depth at the demographics of workers in that industry, and to try to really get into the weeds about what their skills are, ages, and like sort of strategies and different industries that they might be interested in looking at. Also, like skills matching, what are potential like growth areas that could provide opportunities that are easy to switch into from a skill standpoint, but also salary matching as well. And again, I know it's hard to read all of this, but this is all available on our website and some of the appendices. But there are a couple of like cool infographics that came out of this that kind of summarize some of the work that we did. This one that's like in the upper left-hand corner is really kind of a characterization of the workforce overall. This is specifically the workforce that is directly involved in drilling at sites. So it's actually quite small now at the county. It was less than 1,000 people. And then again, it looked into demographics and age and salaries and things like that. And then this one in the lower right-hand corner is kind of looking at, again, just kind of displaying some of the work that we did about like skills alignment and different industries, as well as worker interests. Some of the things that kind of came out that were really interesting were that a lot of the workers were actually interested in staying in the energy sector, in the green energy sector. And I think there was a lot that came out of like a lot of pride in the role that they had played in sort of being the energy providers for LA County. And so they wanted to continue that kind of role in a transition. So again, a lot of that is available online, but now we are thinking about the next phase of that and trying to look at like some early wins, so to speak, that we can achieve. So whether those are specific programs that we can put into place or job programs, specific jobs we can develop at the county that can be opportunities for those kinds of workers as they start to transition. It's not an immediate issue because, as I said, there is an amortization study that needs to happen before we figure out exactly what sites are going to be shut down first and when. But we want to be prepared for all of that. So right now, the next phase is, again, going to be starting to drill into some of the strategies that were put forward and starting to identify some good funding sources as well.
Thank you. Rita, very briefly, although I realize that this question could require a substantive effort, but our time is now coming close to the end.
Yes.
Would you just briefly comment on the LA County's plans regarding water resiliency and recycling projects, the connection with Measure W?
Yeah, sure. So Measure W, again, is like it's a voter approved fund that the county has now. That it was a property tax passed a few years ago that the county is now heavily involved in implementing. And so there is a list of projects that comes forward. It comes in cycles essentially. So we have local matches which individual cities have, as well as regional projects that come forward. And all of this is really to support the development of stormwater infrastructure, both to increase water supply, but also to improve water quality. A lot of people don't know that stormwater is kind of the number one source of surface water pollution in the region. So, and it was not something that had any kind of funding attached to it to address. And so that's why Measure W was put forward. But right now it is driving a lot of infrastructure projects within the county. And if folks are interested in learning more about that, Public Works is leading that effort. And you can look up the Safe Clean Water Program, which is kind of the outward, the outward facing name for Measure W for the program overall to support implementation of that funding. And there are mapping tools that you can look at to see the projects that are funded, planned, or have started to be implemented as well.
Thank you. That's great. Our time is closing, and I want to ask you a final question. Rita, tell me how your families are doing in your soccer season.
That's gonna take a long time to talk. I don't know if we have time. I have two young kids. My son is absolutely obsessed with soccer, which means that our whole weekend is soccer. I don't know how many of y'all are parents, but there's a league called AYSO, American Youth Soccer Organization, apparently also known as All Your Saturdays Are Over. That has really borne out to be true for us, but it's been great so far. He got to be champions of our region, and so that means our season never ends. And they are playing this season as well. So my daughter is into it now as well. So lots of soccer in this family, but it's going well. Everybody loves it for the most part.
Well, thank you. Rita, thank you for the insightful update and overview of LA County's sustainability plan and for answering so many of our questions. Rita's slides, along with a summary and a recording link to this webinar, will be posted on the LINKCO website. The recording will be posted on LINKCO's YouTube channel. LINKCO's upcoming webinars are always listed on our website, and at the end of the webinar, please take a minute to fill out the survey. It will just take you less than a minute. It will help us evaluate and improve our series going forward, and your feedback is most appreciated. LINKCO Executive Search provides elite companies with top C-suite and upper management talent nationwide using a proprietary step-by-step process for both clients and candidates. When you need help, please call upon us. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and see you next time. Thank you very much, Rita.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.